Take two.
Welcome to our second attempt at a video today.
Yes.
Somebody's phone died the first time around, so
I
won't tell you who, but his initials are Chuck Reed.
Please forgive me, Jonah. Please.
So we're back at it again, and after last week's marathon, we're gonna. I wanted to make it 15 minutes apiece. So after last week's marathon, I think we got to be 5 minutes to average it out. So we'll be short today.
Yes.
To start off, I just wanted to update you. We've been talking a little bit about our fellowship fund, and we are just in. We're in such a great position with that fund because of God's, blessing and the faithfulness of faithful giving from our congregation. That we've been able to give quite a bit to a lot of things going on locally and around the world in the last few months. In July, we were able to give $2,000 to that condo collapse in Florida. In August, we were able to give $6,000 to teams for the purchase of their house. Last I heard, they were 20 grand away. I'm pretty sure it's less than that. It's been a few weeks. Then we were also able to give $1,500 towards relief for refugees in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And then coming up in September, we're going to be focusing our fellowship fund offering on Bloom, the ministry from Carol Anderson, the woman we talked about last video and had in church. So we're blown away by just how much God has blessed our church, but also how generous our congregation has been, and because of that, we've been able to give and make an impact locally and globally.
Well, it's just that abundance. Yeah. We don't live in scarcity at First Baptist Church. We know that God's going to provide, and the mission, Acts 1:8, about going to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the outermost parts of the earth. I've been in churches who saw things differently, and it's very important that we stay on mission, mm-hmm. and that we God will provide the abundance if we're on mission, doing what He called us to do, and going to. I love the fact that it's a global. And when I mean global, what I'm saying is global and local, where the idea is the global, which has always been a strength of our church, mm-hmm. the global missions, now connected with local. And as we engage those two sectors of ministry, I liked how Tony Evans used to say. He said, "You impact the person, you impact the in our world, you impact the township, you impact the community, mm-hmm. you impact the city, you impact the state, you impact the nation, you impact the world." Mm-hmm. And, that's where we are. We believe that God's Great Commission is at work right now.
Yeah. So thank you for your just generosity, and we'll continue to update you. There's different places you can find that information throughout the church and different ways on what we've been doing to give and how, your gifts have been a blessing to others. So Jonah, this past week, we wrapped up Jonah, and do you have any kind of closing thoughts as we put Jonah away for a little bit and move on to something else?
I can relate to him. How about you?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you don't get your way. We saw at the end of chapter 3 that God relented and saved these people. And then Jonah, he could have had a parade. I was thinking about that. What's the alternative? He could have had a parade through town, and he could have, had, at least a 3 days journey, just celebrate with everybody that God had given them grace. Instead, he did what we do in these moments. He isolated himself and had a conversation with God. And I love what God says to him, where, he says, do you do well to be angry? Mm-hmm. Scriptures say that righteous anger is something that's different from what Jonah's doing. Righteous anger, be angry and do not sin. Mm-hmm. Well, he's sinning in the midst of his anger. We talked about the fact that he had spiritual amnesia. We talked about the fact that he just forgot who he was, and this is an amazing text because, there's really not an ending. We see that, that God relented, and he asked this question, and the question really, when you read it in verse 11, the last verse in the whole book, "And should I not pity Nineveh, that great city in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not know their right hand from their left, and also much cattle?" And he's just speaking into this, Jonah, you've seen so much of my abundant grace and love for your people, for the people of God, for my people. And then I give you an assignment for someone outside the family, mm-hmm. and the people that do not reflect who I am, but I saw their need. and you responded with anger, and even to the point just kind of gets out of hand. I just want to die. So we're back to page 1. I wonder if he said that in his house. God says you're going to Nineveh. He goes, I just want to die. Yeah. Oh well, no, I'll get on a boat. And so this speaks to our life, because there are things maybe in your life today. There are things in our life that maybe we've left open-ended in those conversations with God and wrestling with. I look at the season coming up. Yeah. There's gonna be some frustrations as we go forward if the variant continues to grow, and sacrifices we'll have to make at a church, as a church. And will we all be in the same, we all want to be on the same page, and that is discerning what God has called us to do. And I think Jonah was a good study before we walk into this fall, because we don't know what's coming, and we just got to trust God in these moments.
I love the term spiritual amnesia is just an interesting one to me, because we saw the Israelites do that in the wilderness. Like they just kept forgetting how God showed up. And then what I found interesting was the very thing Jonah was angry about was the very thing that saved him. Like he says, "For I knew that you are a gracious God, merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love." That's why he didn't want to go to Tarshish, because he didn't want them to experience that. But that's the same thing that God showed him. And the difference is he didn't like that town, or for whatever reason he didn't like that people group, and he didn't think they were deserving of the grace that he was. The same thing. And I keep thinking of, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And it's not just we forget that we were once enemies of God, as Romans puts it. We were before we knew Christ. He died for us. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. We were enemies of God, and he showed us, and that should motivate us to allow that. But he was so angry he wanted to die after delivering the message, because he didn't want them to see it.
Well, he lost focus of the mission because he lost focus of the covenant. The covenant became very personal and nationalistic to him. I am a Jewish prophet. I've been with the king. I've been with the people. I'm a guy who people know who I am. And then he forgot that the covenant that God gave to Abraham was a global covenant that was for all people, and that the people of Israel, and Jonah would have been the poster child for this, making the right decision, is the people of Israel were to be a light to the nations. And you can understand. I mean, this is a country that's very evil, a country that had a lot of issues, a huge. He came from a small town. He's going into a metropolis, but God had called him, and he just forgot. He just was done. And we've all been there, and we've all had these conversations with God, but it teaches us that God will not relent in our lives. We see that. You will not be plucked out of my hand. And the fact that when God calls us to something, He will provide. He will save. He will prod us into those moments to help us. And but it's just a great story. It's a great opportunity for us to grow in that area of maturity when it comes to God calling us into a place that we really don't want to go.
Yeah, you just said that they were to be set apart to be a light, and we did a study this spring in Ephesians with the youth, and talking about there was a line in the temple that the Gentiles couldn't go past, and instead of using their set apartness, the Jews' set apartness as a light, they used it as a stumbling block, a line in the sand to separate themselves as better than the people that they don't deserve it. We do, and that's not that's just something that we need to guard ourselves against. Is we who know Christ are not more worthy than people who don't. We are to be a light to bring other people to Him. So real briefly, this Sunday's Labor Day weekend. Give us a real brief sneak peek about what you're talking about this week.
Well, we're going to talk about worship and work, Psalm 122, Colossians 3. The whole idea is the expectations. This weekend's Communion Sunday. We want to make sure that you're aware of that. And coming to worship, what are our expectations? And then how do they work out in our week at work? And I'm really excited about this sermon. It's really a lot of application. But just the idea of worship and work and their that they both impact us every day. And how does our worship of God impact the workplace? and how is the way we act in the workplace reflect our relationship with God. So just a great Labor Day weekend type sermon where we're going to celebrate who we are in Him and what He's called us to in the area of work.
How does our worship of God reflect in the workplace? It just reminds me of a time when I had to get up at 5:30 and my job for 3 hours was to cut lunch meat, and by cut lunch meat I mean stand there and watch the slicer do this, and there was times where I was miserable, and that kind of mindset came to me, and I'm like, how do I reflect God's glory? How do I do this for God's benefit, and what impact could that have on the people around me? So it's hard to do that when you're cutting lunch meat.
Yeah, it's hard to do that. I understand.
Looking ahead, there are about 5 Iron Pigs tickets left, right? Call the office ASAP if you're interested. That is Friday night, so by the time you see this, it might be the night of watching this. The men's retreat is September 17th and 18th. We also, next we're going to bring you a brief overview of what some of the life studies are doing on Sunday nights starting September 19th. And be on the lookout in the update and the slides and the lobby for information about our fall festival. That's coming up at the end of October, and we're starting to get rolling with planning and ways you can get involved in running a game. We're adding a trunk or treat this year into it, and how you can do that. And just there's a whole lot of ways we need you to step in so that we can be a outreach to the community and connect with the community in a real way. So thanks for joining us for another week, and we're praying that as you go throughout your weekend that God will move and continue to reveal Himself in ways that are just blow us away. And if you have stories, continue to share that with us. We'd love to hear those stories about how God has moved in your life and what He's doing. So thanks for joining us, and have a great week.
God bless you guys. See you this weekend.